All right. Good morning, good evening, or good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are in the world. My name is Kyle Bachner. I'm one of the sales engineers here at Decisions, and I'm currently joined by another sales engineer in our team, Robert Young, for this webinar on common approval patterns. Again, we have launched a poll. We're going to keep it open for another minute, but if y'all wouldn't mind filling that out, we do appreciate it. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into our webinar today. We are going to be talking about common approval patterns, so different ways we can get work done within decisions or outside of decisions, depending on what you're trying to accomplish. So before we get started, for those of you that are new to Decisions, we are a business process management software that helps non-technical people to easily automate and optimize business processes without the need to code. On this slide are some of our current customers in different sectors to give you an idea of where Decisions fits overall. We are equal parts rules engine and workflow. So there's a lot of different problems that we can solve across different industries. And here are our lovely headshots. You can match a name with a face. As I said, my name is Kyle Bachner, and I am joined by Robert Young. We've had the pleasure of meeting many of you on webinars or over video calls in the past. But of course, everything is virtual right now. So we're going to be talking about some of our upcoming events, which all are virtual. We welcome any connections and questions on LinkedIn. So please feel free to add us there either now or after the webinar. But let's talk about things that are coming up real quick. So in early May, we have our beginner and intermediate training happening in the Australian Eastern Standard Time Zone. So that's going to be both beginner and intermediate training. So whichever one makes most sense for you to sign up for, feel free to do it. But we also have on the 6th another webinar coming up, building dynamic questionnaires with rule chains. So this is going to get into some more complex building within decisions, specifically using rule chains to make those dynamic questionnaires. So tune in if that is something that is of interest to you. And last, in mid-May, we do have our professional certification. And then at the end of May, we have our beginner and intermediate trainings again. That professional certification, you do need the associate certification, or you have to have passed that course prior to signing up for this. But just make sure if you all sign up, just be sure to check out the time zones, make sure that you're signing up for one that makes the most sense for where you are in the world. But real quick, let's just go over our agenda for today. So we're just going to be talking at a high level about what an assignment is, and then we're going to go straight into our platform and talk about how we can work assignments within decisions and outside of decisions, go over how we can build common approval patterns and what those patterns can actually accomplish. So before we get started, just want to make sure everyone is aware of what is on their screen for the Q&A and the chat. We don't have a screenshot of that Zoom toolbar here right now, but most of you should know how to use it by now. So if you have any questions as we go along this today, please feel free to put them in the chat or in the Q&A section. So that way we can try to get to those as soon as possible. We do have some of our team on the line to help answer those live in case we can't get to them, in case Robert and myself cannot get to them during our presentation. But yeah, let's just talk about assignments real quick. So assignments, or tasks as they're called in a lot of other systems, will permanently pause a workflow or a process until action is taken on it. And that can be either by a user or an external service or system. They really sit at the core of approval-based processes, but they can be used in pretty much any process that waits for an interaction of some sort. So because of all these traits, primary use for assignments is to help maintain processes that are really long-running and stateful. But using our visual no-code workflow designer, today we're just going to go through some of these different approval patterns using assignments, and then show all the ways that users can interact with them. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to have Robert go straight into the platform and show us different ways that we can get work done using our system. So take it away, Robert.
All right, thanks, Kyle. If you'll just verify that once I get my screen share up that you can see the screen there.
Yep, you're all good.
Perfect. All right, So for my part of the presentation, what I'm going to do is just take you through a couple of examples of how you can respond to assignments. And as Kyle mentioned, that an assignment is just something that's waiting for some sort of interaction from somebody. So that's what we'll demonstrate here as we go through this process. To start with, we're going to be working a lot over here on the right-hand side in this property sheet. So I'll try to explain as much of it to you as I can as we walk through it. But this is where we'll do all of our assignments and set up all the properties for the different type of approval processes that we'll go through. Now, as we get started in this, one of the things to keep in mind is when we have this form on the page here, there's a couple different assignment types. There's an in session and assigned. Assigned is the one that you want when you're trying to get, when you want it to be assigned to somebody or to something to get some action to be taken upon it. So you'll see that this is the option that we'll be choosing. So for our first example, what we want to do is just set up an assignment that will go into an inbox and allow you to work that assignment directly from that inbox. So what I'm going to do to create this first initial one is I got a form here I've already created. I just call my inbox action form. And it's real simple. We can just take a quick look at it. I just have a value on here, just a label basically, and a submit button. So that's all we'll have for this one. Now, what we'll do is we'll connect the submit over here to our end step. So if we'd gone through and just submitted it, it would go through our step. But we want to create some approval processes for this particular component. So I'm going to go over here to my assignment setup. And down through here, I can add some action definitions. And these actions are going to be for what we want to do within our inbox. So I'm going to turn off responding to email because we're not going to be using that right now. And this we'll use approved as one of our outcomes. And then we'll add a second one. Now these are going to be the steps or actions that we can take when we right click on the item within the inbox. So we'll go ahead and we'll connect our actions up here to approved. We have an approval pop up, so we can just see that it did work and went that path. And we'll put our deny, if we denied it, down here to a denied pop up so we can show that path as well. Now over here on the right hand side, we do want to do a couple of things here so that we can get the assignment to work properly. One is we need somebody to assign it to. In this case, I'm just assigning to myself. I could assign it to a group as well, or assign it to other people if I wanted to by just typing in the assignment action here, and that will pick that up. Now we do need to give it an assignment name. So I'm just going to type in review request. And the assignment action will just be a review. So this will be one of the actions that we can have within our pop-up. If I could type today, it would even be better. So there we go. So now we have our form set up. We have our assignment. We have an assignment name. I just typed in as a constants point. However, it could be selected from the flow so we could get the values for this, or even from creating a text file here or a textual representation of what the request was. But just for the simple one, we're going to leave it as just review request. Okay, so now let's debug this and see how it works. So now we're in debug mode, and you can see here as we're in debug mode, we can see the path it's taking, and this dialog is popping up for us. But now let's go over here into my portal, and I can see the request that I need to approve or deny. So I'll right click on it. I'll click approve. We'll say approve. We'll complete that assignment. It's now been removed from my inbox. You can see over here in our pop-up, the request has been approved. And if we go back over here into our debug mode, you can see the path that it takes, and it's actually completed here, and it's on the end step. So we've gone from the form, went ahead and approved it, got a little pop-up there, and now we finished that particular part of the process. All right. So that is just doing doing it very quickly from an inbox. So what I want to do next is show you how just what almost a typical type of assignment and approval process might be. So I'm going to remove these guys here, just to get these out of the way. Actually, what I just need to do is change the form. So I'll go ahead and edit these and remove them from the form. I'll just clear those. And then I'm going to change to a different form. So we're just going to use a form to actually do our approval. So we'll pick a new form. And I have a purchase request form. Now in this case, on the purchase request form, if we take a look at it, we'll see we have an area to put in our asset, the cost, and the reason for this particular request. And then what we're going to do is just step ahead and do our denied or approved type of process for this. So to do that, again, I'll just connect my workflow to each of these items. So we have that hooked up. And one thing I need to do here is I need to add the inputs into that form. So I'm just going to do it this way, which will make it really easy. So there will be our asset. We have our cost, which is a decimal. And then finally, we have our reason. All right. We'll save that. And we'll close that out. Now, just to make sure that everything is connected correctly, I'll look at my input mappings here. It's a really nice feature of the tool is I have a visual mapper here for all of my elements. Now, because I named them the same as what I have them defined in that form, it went ahead and made those connections for me. So we're all straight away with that. All right, so let's go ahead and debug this one and see again how this one works. And again, I'm just leaving it as review request and leaving it assigned to myself. Okay, so let's go ahead and debug this flow. And we'll just say our asset is coffee. Well, the cost is $250. And the office needs coffee. So we'll click start debugging. And now again, you can see the form has popped up because we're in debug mode. We can see the path that it's taken. But now if we go over into our inbox, we can go ahead and review this. Here's our coffee that needs to be approved. We'll go ahead and approve it. And you can see our request has been approved. And if we go back over into our debug mode, we can see the path that it took and it followed the approval path. All right. For our last scenario and example, what we'd like to demonstrate is showing you how you can do this via email. So I'm going to use the same form and we'll do the same assignments as well. But what we'd like to do is add some additional steps within the process for this. So what we'll do is we'll go in here and we'll do some email handling and we'll do it with what we call links only. This way we can get an email that will have links in it and allow us to approve or deny the particular action. So what I'll do is in my show editor here, I've already got some definitions set up for respond to my task, which is going to be asset and cost. So we'll save that. So we have that set up. And then we have our editor here, which I do need to then refix this right quick to show what our new values are. So our justification actually has become reason. So I accidentally changed that a few minutes ago and forgot to change that. And how I got that to work. All right. So there'll be our reason. And we can just type in our reason value here. Well, let me show you how this works again, because it looks like somebody messed up the grid. So I'll just add the grid back. Say, okay, this is going to be our asset. Over here, I can type in that. I can type in my cost. Now, what you're seeing that's popping up is something new in version 7. For those who are familiar with version 6, this is just it's like if anybody's familiar with a lot of coding tools, as I type in, as I work within here, it also looks to bring up, like in this case, my variables for me automatically. So I don't have to go back and keep editing everything by hand, even though I messed up on this particular one right here. There we go. So now I want to add a link. So forgot to define something. So I'll go ahead and save that right quick. But we have to go back into this form as well. And we do need to go into our setup again and add our new assignments back. So let me go ahead and add those assignments again. Now this time we're going to leave it that we can respond via email. And I'm just going to say approved via email. I'll call it email approval. How about that? Email approval. So that'll be that one. And then for our next one, we will add email deny. And I know this is not the most interesting naming convention I'm using here, but what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is to show you that you can see the path that it'll eventually take when we go through the email. So this will be our email approval path over here, and then our email denial path this way. So let me pull these out a little bit, so hopefully you can see these a little bit better. Pull the whole thing down just some. And maybe that'll open that up just a little bit, hopefully. It's not working out. Anyways, we have both our approval paths up there and our denial paths down here. So then we'll go ahead and debug this as well. So again, we can put in our asset. This time, let's say we need cups, and the cups are $100. And the reason is need cups for coffee, because we got the expensive Starbucks coffee. So go ahead and start our debug in this case scenario here. We have our form that pops up, shows our values within it. But also I should be able to go over into my email, and I should have a request here or a task to actually, there we go, actually approve or deny our particular email. And obviously I made another mistake. Welcome to a live webinar, folks. I'm making a couple mistakes here today and I apologize. So let me go back in. I added the, make sure I've got everything correct here. I know the one thing I need to do is we need to go back into our form, into our email here, and add the, where'd my email go? There we go. Not far enough down. You need to go back to our editor. We need to add the links back. So I apologize for that. So here's our link for email approval. And then down here, we'll put our link for email deny response. So there's our two links. So that's what I meant to add in there and forgot by mistake. So we'll save that. We'll save that again. And then let's try to debug it one more time. So again, let's try some cups. And to show that it's the newer one, we'll call it $150 this time. And we need cups for coffee. All right, so we'll start that debug. So now we see our values here. I'll go over into my other browser and I'll refresh my inbox. And here's our cups for $150. So now we see our cups, we see our values, and now we can either approve it or deny it. In this case, I'll just click on email approval, and we can see that it's actually been approved and that task has now been completed. So there you go. There's your pathing that it went through. Our pop-up actually occurred and it got to our end step at this point. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over to Kyle. Sorry for the mistakes, folks, but I think hopefully you got what you needed. But Kyle will take this a little bit further for you and show you some actual ways that you can work through in different ways to set up the assignments.
Thanks for showing us that, Robert. Can you just confirm you can see my screen real quick?
That I can.
Okay, perfect. And for those of you who are still interested in seeing how the email handling and stuff works, we do have a webinar specifically on email handling, and you're also welcome to check out our documentation to give a walkthrough of how our different approval patterns work as well. So you don't have just this webinar to reference, we do have resources available offline as well. But what we're going to talk about today, or in this portion, since we just talked about how we can get work done within or outside of decisions, is different patterns of getting that work done. So by that, what I mean is, for example, we're going to build out an approval process, but this is going to be a sequential process for the first one we build out. So that's going to mean that I submit something, and then it's going to be tasked to someone to review or approve or deny it. And then after they approve or deny it, it'll go to the next person in the process, so on and so forth. So really simple example, but I still want to show it. So what I'm going to do is just create a workflow, and we're just going to call this sequential pattern flow. Now, I do have two forms already created for this webinar, a purchase request form and then a review form that we are going to be using to submit that assignment and then to actually review the work that has been assigned to us. So over in our steps toolbox, I'm just going to drag out the show form step, and this is going to be our purchase request form. So best practices within decisions, rename your steps whenever you can so you know what they're doing. keep your line straight, all that fun stuff. So I'm just going to go ahead and pick that form that I created, a purchase request form, and I'm going to click into it just so you can see what that looks like. So we're just giving our name, what we need, or when we need it by, and what we actually need for that request. And it just gives us the option to submit it. So no approvals going on there. So once I actually submit it, we're going to then drop in another show form step, and this is going to be that actual assignment. So in the top right, pick or create. Now we're going to pick the review form, and I'm going to drill down into that as well so we can see what it is. It is exactly the same as our purchase request form, except we have the deny and approve buttons here at the bottom to give those different outcome paths in our workflow. And in our property panels on each of these components, what you're going to notice is under behavior, I do have initially enabled unchecked for each of these components. So I am disabling the ability for the reviewer to actually edit any of the fields that are in this form. So we're going to get back to our workflow. And let's say, for example, anyone who denies it, it's just going to end that workflow. We might have it maybe go to a different process, like email them, let them know, hey, your request has been denied. But we're just keeping things simple and not building out an entire process like that. We're just keeping it to only what happens with the assignment logic. But use your imagination for what comes after. If you deny it, you could send an email, maybe just to let them know about that, get some back and forth communication. But we're going to say, if someone approved it, then we're going to have another person approve it. So I just dropped another show form step here, and let me actually move that link for the deny path so it makes a little bit more sense. And on our form, first, we do have to make sure that it is changed from in session to assigned, because again, it is a task we are creating. So I'm going to make that assigned, and I'm just going to make sure it's assigned to myself. Now, when we do this assign to, we can assign to individual accounts, and you can also assign to a group. So assigning to a group, it's going to task everyone within that group with this, and then anyone from within that group can work it. So a few different ways we can do who that's assigned to, but I'm just going to call that assignment name, review needed. Our action is just review. And now I'm actually just going to copy and paste this form because it already has all those configuration details for that assignment set up for me. And now I'm just going to change who that is assigned to. So after I review it, I'm going to say the administrator account has to actually review this. And now I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that is on the denied path. And we're just going to, connect the approved path as well, because it's the same thing in this example. We are not building out our post-approval logic here. So now that we have strung together these steps, let's go into our debugger and run this and see what's going to happen. It's going to be pretty straightforward, but still want to show it off. So I'm going to put in my name. When do we need our request by? Let's say next Friday. And what's our request? A lot of coffee. So we can go ahead and submit this. And then moving back over into our inbox, we can see that that assignment was generated for us to work. And we can go ahead and review that and approve it. Go to our very next person in the process. Now that is going to be assigned to the administrator, so I don't have the ability right now to approve or deny it from this account. And I am not going to work it as the admin yet because I'm saving that for an example later on that I want to show with that assignment that is generated here right now. So that is one way that we can do sequential approvals, where we are doing, or where for that sequential pattern, we are basically just assigning different people throughout the chain of who needs to look at it. So now let's make another flow and let's do a similar pattern, but instead of defining who is going to be reviewing it within that assignment properties, we're going to do it dynamically, and we're going to make it a manager approval. So I'm going to make this workflow, and same thing as last time, just going to go ahead and drag out our purchase request form. And I'm going to make sure that I go ahead and select that from the top right here, because I already have that made. So we'll select our purchase request form. And now what we're going to do is make sure that it gets assigned to our manager. And the way we define that manager is I'm going to go into our system settings real quick. So under system, security, and accounts. And just to note, you do need admin access in order to access any of these system settings. So going to accounts, I can find my actual user account and edit it. And one of the properties on it is you can actually define an account that is the manager for each of them. So if I say if it wasn't admin for this account here, I could go ahead and pick, and we could see all the different accounts available. So sorry, Jess, you're not my boss for this example. But here we can see admin at decisions.com is defined as our manager. And the way that's going to come in handy is when we go back into our workflow, there's actually a step that's called Get Manager. So I'm going to scroll down in our steps toolbox here on the left side and open up System and then Accounts. And you'll see the step Get Manager. And it does exactly as what we've been talking about, where I'm just going to pass in an ID or an account ID, so the unique ID associated with my Decisions account, into this step, and then it's going to spit out the account details for the person that is my manager. And in this case, because I've defined it as that admin account, we'll get the details for the admin account as our output. So now we have the manager that is being fetched from this step here. So now we're going to feed that into another step or into another form or assignment so we can actually do that approval. So this is going to be our review form. And I'm going to go ahead and select it because we've already created that. And we're just going to attach the approve and deny paths again to the end because we're not dealing with that post approval logic at the moment. Okay, so what we're going to do is make sure we have our Get Manager step set up. So under our inputs, we just have that account ID exposed, and I'm just going to select that dropdown, go to select from flow. And the way we're going to pull in this account ID is from our flow data. So with every single workflow and decisions, you'll have this flow data available, which is just going to be some default data about what's happening. And what we're really interested in here is the initiating account. So what that means is it's going to grab the account details of whoever kicked off this workflow. So whoever is making that purchase request. So drilling into initiating account, because it is a complex type, it does have different fields available, including our account ID. So grabbing our account ID from the initiating account, which again is whoever kicks off the workflow, and passing it into this Get Manager step. And then the manager account will be the output. So how do we get that manager into our form for the approval? So the way we're going to do that is we're going to make sure it's assigned, but we're not going to be using this assigned to because this is a static input. And you'll notice we can't actually expose it to any variables like we can with assignment name, for example, but I'll show how you can do that. So we're going to call that assignment name the same thing, review needed, the action is just review. And now the person that we're assigning it to, in order to get that manager and pass it in dynamically, I'm going to open this assignment setup in our properties panel here. And what we're going to want is this accounts and groups. So this is where we can define dynamically, that is passing in data from upstream in our flow, who actually has to approve different things. So I'm going to select from flow. Actually, I'm going to build array on this because we're just passing in a single manager. But this is looking for a list of strings or a list of accounts. So I'm just going to go ahead and build array, and that's just going to let me build an array of one item, which is that manager. Because I know that it is looking for a list, it's not going to accept that single input. So I'm going to make sure I have that get manager one output for the first item for this array. So again, we are just passing in a list of one item into our accounts and groups, and it will dynamically assign it to our manager. So let's go ahead and see how that works. I'm going to go into our debugger, and let's run this again. So my name is still my name, thankfully, and request, we still need more coffee. How can people go through so much coffee? Because, we work in software, we pretty much run on it. So let's submit that. And then let's look at our output for this Get Manager step to make sure it worked correctly for us. So all I did was just drilled into that step, open the inputs and outputs, and we can see my account ID got passed in. And then our output is all the details for that administrator account. So if I go ahead and open a new window, I'm going to navigate back to that instance I was working on. And we're going to go to our inbox. And fingers crossed, we're going to see an assignment there waiting for us to work. And we can see that that assignment did get generated, so we can go ahead and work it or just review it. And we're going to say we will approve this request, go back into our main workflow, and see that it did go along that approve path in our debugger. So that's another way that we could do sequential approvals, doing that manager approval. And now there's two more examples I want to show, and these are going to be parallel approval logic. So I'm going to close again. And we're going to now make a new workflow, and I'm just going to call it parallel logic or parallel approval logic. And we're going to create it. And similar to last time, same thing, the purchase request form is going to be our first step. So we can go ahead and submit that. And then we just have to decide what our logic is going to be. So just picking that form, and we're going to be doing logic where it's multiple people are assigned it, and they are going to be working that task in parallel. So in order to do that, there are two steps that are really important to use, and they're called the branch step and the merge step. So I'm going to look for the branch step and pull it back into our workflow real quick and make sure I grab the merge step as well. So what do branch and merge do? Well, we just have a single workflow running here, but if I go ahead and connect it to the branching step, and then I'm going to pull out a show form step and set up that assignment for the review form real quick and connect it to our path for our branching step. And once we do that, another path gets created on our branch step. And that's because it is actually creating those multiple different paths that will be executing in parallel. So when I hover over it, we can see that path 2 is created, but I'm just going to make sure I have this assignment set up real quick before I copy and paste this form step to make that branching path. So this one is going to be assigned to me again. Assignment name is going to be review needed, and assignment action is just review. And we're just going to ignore that field there. And we're just going to make sure that our inputs are now mapped in correctly. So we're getting the name, the needed by date, and these are just the inputs that are coming in from our form, the purchase request form that we submitted. So passing in all those fields, let's make sure we rename this to review form. And now let's just go ahead and, similar to last time, copy and paste this form step, and we're going to connect it to our path 2. And you'll see again, after we connect something to a path, a new one does get generated, or you can just hover over that branch step to see the new path. Click it, drag it wherever it needs to go, but we're only working with 2 paths for this example. So we now have the 2 parallel assignments that are being generated. And let me make sure that this one is assigned to someone else real quick because I don't want 2 assignments for the same example. And make sure everything is set up. And it looks like that assignment name has saved. Great. Okay, everything looks set up there. So now what we're going to say is, once we're done with approving this, we're just going to have those different approval paths go to our merge step. And what happens on this merge step is it's not going to continue on with the workflow until both of these paths have been executed. So when both people click approve, then we'll continue on with the logic in our workflow. Or both people have to deny, or one deny, one approve. Again, that just means everyone does have to work it in order for it to move on from this merge. But what if we wanted a different pattern? Maybe it was a veto vote, or it had to be unanimous. So if someone were to deny it, it doesn't even matter what everyone else responds with. We're just going to go ahead and cancel that because it has to be unanimous. Well, there's a way we can do that. And that's going to be on this merge step. What field we want to click is going to be called allow cancel merge. So I'm just going to click on allow cancel merge, and we'll have some inputs exposed. And you might be thinking, why are there inputs on a step that just merges a workflow? And that's because this is how we are giving it the logic to tell it, are we continuing on with the workflow, or are we waiting for everyone else to finish? So we are just going to be passing in a Boolean value to say, if this is true, cancel all the other assignments. It doesn't matter. Let's just go on with the workflow. So to create that Boolean or that true false, what I'm going to do is drag out create data. And this is a step that will allow you to just go ahead and define whatever data within your workflow you have to use. So I'm connecting both of the deny paths to the step because when someone denies, we are going to cancel that merge. So we just have to make that Boolean to tell it to cancel. So in our properties panel on the right side for our create data step, I'm going to click on show editor and I'm just going to make that cancel merge and I'm going to change the type to a Boolean. And now I'm going to make sure that that data that is created is true. So I just selected the check mark there to make sure that Boolean is defined as true when it's created. And now going back to our merge step, I can just select from our workflow that cancel merge Boolean. So let's look at how this works because it'll probably make a little bit more sense once we run this workflow. So I'm going to go to our debugger and let's start debugging it. Put in my name, still need coffee for real. Where is it? And let's go ahead and just choose a random date for needed by, and I'll submit it. Now, an assignment did get created for me, and that's what I'm seeing on my screen here right now. So if I click approve, then it's going to wait for the second reviewer until we can move along with that workflow. But let me run this again. And let me show you what happens when we click deny. So again, same assignment that was generated for me, but I'm going to click deny, and then we'll see in our workflow that that create data step gets triggered. So that Boolean of true was created, passed into our merge, and then it doesn't even care about the response from the second assignment. Because this is a veto or unanimous vote, for example, this pattern would work for, we're just going to go ahead and cancel it and just continue on with our process. So again, we are not doing that post-approval logic, but this could be any number of processes that's happening, whether to let them know, hey, that's been denied, or send it back to the original submitter. But that is one way that we could do that parallel logic. So this is doing it with the branch and merge step, but there's actually another way we can do it, and that's using what's called branch for each. So I'm going to make a new workflow, and let's just call it branch for each, approval. And you guessed it, similar to last time, we're going to drag out that show form step and set up our purchase request. So again, we can go ahead and get that information. So good thing we already had that made. And let me just go ahead and rename this step for best practices. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for a step called branch for each step. And I'm also going to grab that merge step while I'm here because we actually need it in order to continue on with our workflows from that branch for each. So one more thing that I'm going to do is on our start step, I'm going to be defining a list of approvers. And this is just me defining it on the start step of our workflow. This would normally be, for example, maybe a form or a list that's just passed in that's already defined. But I'm just going to do it on the start step to make my life easy for this example. So we are going to be passing in a list of people that have to approve it. We have our purchase request that will be shown to me to fill out. And then we're going to connect that to the branch for each step. And now all I have to do is just define the actual type that's going to be coming into this. So what data are we working with? We know that's string, and it's going to then ask for where is that list of strings coming from. So let's just select it from our workflow. It is the approvers that I have defined in our start step. And now this branch for each step is going to have a outcome path. So that way we can build a workflow for it to actually execute. So we can see on our branch for each step, we have this for each path coming out of it. And what I'm going to do is search for a flow, this pick or create flow step. And that's because in order to use this branch for each, immediately after this step, you have to use a subflow. And that's because branch for each, what it does is instead of creating those parallel paths that we saw last time, where they do kind of interact with each other, where that merge won't happen until we have both of the approvals, for example, what it's going to do is just create a branch for each of the different items we pass in. So a different assignment for each reviewer, but they're going to be completely independent flows. So that's what we call asynchronous behavior. So this branch for each step will allow you to create multiple assignments based off of a list that you pass in, and all of those will be asynchronous. So they won't be things that you can really watch in the debugger, for example, because of that flow behavior, but it is just another style. Basically a fire and forget is what that asynchronous behavior is. So it's not going to wait for everything else in the workflow. It's just going to continue on once we actually go ahead and have that step kick off. So I'm going to pick a workflow that I've actually already created. And that is just called assign to branches. So let's go into this assign to branches flow real quick. And you'll see on the start step, we just have the approver that is a single item, not a list, being passed in. And then all the details from our purchase request, so name, need to buy, and request. We're passing all that information into this form. And then in our assignment setup, we are dynamically passing in the single approver that has to actually approve this. So let's close and get back to our main workflow. And then we're going to connect that path or that output from our subflow into our merge step. And that's because in order for your workflow to continue after branch for each, you do have to tell it to go back to asynchronous behavior by using this merge step here. So make sure we have everything input correctly. And for that approver, I'm going to go to select from flow because the way that branch for each step works is it's taking in that list of approvers, and then it's just going to spit them out one by one every time it kicks off as this item. And that's just going to be the single item that it's sending into our workflow. So we have this set up. Let's go ahead and see how it works. So let's go into our debugger, and I'm going to define the different approvers. So there's myself, and then I'm going to do the admin account again. And let's go ahead and debug this and just run our workflow. So what's my name? What's my request? Coffee again. And let's go ahead, submit this, and then watch what happens in the background. So what happened is this branch for each step has kicked off, and it has created two subflows because we passed in a list of two reviewers. And we can see what those flows are here. So again, two flows were created that are independent of each other with that asynchronous behavior, where each of them has a different assignment, or each of them is assigned to a different person. So I'm going to go back into my inbox, and we can see that that review item did come in. And if I go ahead and review it from here and just click approve, what we're going to see back in our workflow is that we can follow along with that approval path that got executed, and we could see that we're just waiting for the other one to finish for our merge here. But yeah, that is basically how you can use the branch for each step in order to do this parallel approval pattern. Now, there's one more thing I want to show y'all before we finish our webinar today, and it's just a fun example that I built out that really doesn't have much of a real life use case, but just to give you an idea of some cool things you can do using some more complex steps. So what I'm going to do is make a workflow where I just pass in the email for an account. And then what's going to happen is it's going to fetch all of the assignments that are associated with that account, loop through them all, and then complete them all. So you might be thinking, what's the use case for this? Well, it might be maybe an employee left and you have to make sure all their assignments are just completed or deleted. And instead of going into that account and manually doing them all, you could just make a workflow to loop through it, for example. But what we're going to do in order to do that is we're going to be using steps that are within our internal services. So again, this is going to get a little bit more complicated. So I'm going to scroll down here and let me just go back in real quick. And apologies, folks, just having issues with my server. I'm going to go into the workflow that I already have built for this actually, and I'm just going to point out where I got all these different steps from. So if we go into our integration, and then we're going to scroll down and make sure that we have this advanced selected. So under integration, we're looking for internal services. Internal services are not going to be steps that are searchable in your steps toolbox, but you're going to see there are a lot of steps available. So if you've ever heard us say decisions is built on top of itself, this is kind of how that works. So all these internal services steps are different methods that pretty much drive all the back-end logic of decisions. And if we go into assignment, we'll see that we have all these steps available that pertain to assignments. So we have get assignments by user email. That is down here. Get assignments by user email. We can also do it by account ID. And then the other step we're using is, again, that complete assignment. So let's walk through this workflow and how these steps are working. So we have that input on our start step for the actual account. And then we have our get assignments by user where we're just passing in the account that we defined. Because of that, we will get a list of assignments that are associated with that account. And then we're just going to be looping through on this for each step, passing in that assignment. So we can then pass in each individual one into the complete. So it will go ahead and complete the assignments for us. Now, let me just make sure that we actually do have some assignments that are created for our admin account here. So let me go back into decisions and let me go ahead and run a workflow once or twice for that manager approval, because I know that this will make one for that admin account. So forgive me for the garbage data there I'm sending in, but we have now created an assignment within that admin account. So let me go ahead and open up that inbox real quick. And it got assigned to us. Cool. So what I'm going to do now, open up decisions and go back to that workflow that I created for the complete all assignments by user. So I'm going to go into our debugger and I'm just going to define that account. So which one do we want to complete all assignments for? Admin at decisions. Let's go ahead and debug this. And what it did is it grabbed all the assignments for the admin account, passed them into our loop, completed them all, and then our workflow finished. So let me open up my tab again so we can see that that did get accomplished. And that second review task was completed. Don't worry about this one here. Just go ahead and get rid of that. But the one that was assigned to us was just completed using that step. So again, that's using the more complex internal services steps in order to get this work done. So hopefully just to give you some ideas of different ways you can use our platform or different ways these assignments work. But yeah, that is basically everything we have to show for you guys today. So Robert and myself are going to be on the line for a little bit longer, so we can go ahead and answer any questions that y'all might have. And it might help if I actually knew how to make this full screen. There we go. But again, my name is Kyle Bachner and joined with Robert Young. But feel free to reach out to us at sales@decisions.com or at support@decisions.com for any questions you have regarding our platform or our sales process in general, or just, if you want to chat, but not actually that. Please contact us if you have any questions. Robert, if you'd like to sign off. Again, we'll be on for a little longer to do some Q&A, but yeah, thanks for joining, guys.